Final segment this morning with our guest, Professor Thomas Schwartz from over at Vanderbilt, and taking phone calls. A lot of interesting thoughts and opinions on this, on presidential politics and some of the latest developments out of D.C. and the like. Let's go next to James. Hi, James.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning, James. What's on your mind?
I support Trump in some ways, but you got to remember this. All his friends and buddies are getting indicted and thrown in prison. And you got to remember, birds of a feather flock together. He's the bird, and all these people that are on him are feathers. And I think Trump is really running the country down like, around the world. We look like Russia, China, with all this corruption and misleadership that we have now.
Well, interesting. I mean, yeah, you judge a person by his friends, maybe. I mean, look, I don't know about with Cohen and Manafort, of course, who knows how, he obviously must have known them well. But I was scratching my head big time when he brought the reality star on, Omarosa, is that her name?
Omarosa, yes.
Omarosa, yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And but when they brought her on, and I just thinking, oh, she's a reality show contestant that became a friend of his, as they knew, and I never really watched the show too much, but then now she's writing all this book, and obviously she had, it seemed like an axe to grind and all this, but I was like, what are you thinking she was a sideshow. Kind of, on this other thing. And what made her credible to be in some of these meetings in the White House? And so now he's getting burned by some of that, I think.
Historically, presidents have often been hurt by their friends.
Yeah.
And particularly personal friends. I mean, you go back,
sure.
I'm thinking, as you were talking, I was thinking about Harry Truman, who got affected by some of the Missouri friends he brought in, some of whom tried to exploit their friendship.
Capitalize on it.
It has happened historically, and this could hurt Trump.
Yeah, okay. And again, it's not unique to President Trump, but it happens. Let's go next to Bruce. Hi, Bruce.
Hey, Nick. How are you, buddy?
Good, Bruce. What's on your mind?
Well, I've always admired you. I liked what you said to that one individual. How far is this going to go before the Republicans will say, hey, something's got to be done? But, he's got his cheerleader, Sean Hannity, on Fox News, do no wrong, Sean. And I don't know. That's what I admire about Phil Bredesen. He's more in the middle, and that's what I like. Give me a little bitter with the sweet. But Marsha, she's going to have her hands full, I think.
It's going to be a good race. It's going to be a good race. It's going to be different. You talked about it earlier. I mean, Phil Bredesen running as a Democrat in a Republican state, but I think clearly moderate, a former businessman with a good reputation. Yeah. And then you have Marsha Blackburn, of course, who is a conservative Republican and a staunch supporter of President Trump, and how that plays out. I mean, but I just wonder the role of moderates in today's political scene. I like moderates, meaning I may not agree with everything, but they're moderate. They're more open to compromise than some people who just dig in their heels, insist on their way, and nothing gets done.
Yeah, no, and I think Phil Bredesen is running ads. For example, I saw the ad this morning of his talking about how Washington shouldn't tell us what to do.
Oh, I saw that ad, yep.
And, he's basically playing very much to Tennessee sensibilities, and it'll be fascinating to see whether that will work.
Yeah, and on the other hand, you have Marsha Blackburn, who I think as a congresswoman really looked out for a lot of things and for her constituents in this state. Exactly. And she's aware of the fact that Trump has a lot of strong support here, and she's closely aligned herself with him.
Very much.
Okay, I guess for better or for worse, but I think she firmly believes it's an asset, and he's going to campaign for her.
He'll campaign for her.
Yeah. Let's go to Tom. Hi, Tom.
Yes.
Hey, Tom. Go ahead, sir.
How you doing, Nick?
Good. What's on your mind?
I'm sitting here listening to you talk about the president and everything else. I'm an independent.
Okay.
And I really feel that Trump's doing all this stuff he wants to. It's like paying these women off for prostitution. Is that legalized prostitution now, since President is able to pay for the prostitution, or does he promote it?
Well, he wasn't really paying them for the sex. If you believe that this happened, he's paying them to not go public with the affairs.
Right.
But I hear what you're saying. Go on.
I'm sure there's something going on in between there. Honestly, I'm just going to tell you, I hope a lot of people don't get upset with me, but I feel like this is the beginning of the Antichrist.
Oh. You just think it's going to end badly?
Yes. Okay. I'm thinking that our country's fixing to end. It's coming to an end.
Well, I hope you're wrong, and I believe you're wrong. You know what? It's very instructive, I think, and it's far for us to living in the moment, but I think you can maybe speak to this, that this is not the first time, and it won't be the last time that we have had a president or very powerful political leaders, but presidents that have caused, for better or for worse, some incredible turmoil and controversy and been different than anything we've seen before, where the country may have been very unsettled one way or the other. And the country survives, the system's in place. This is different, but is it that much different than some of the other crises, or not even crises, different that we've had from other presidents in the past that maybe have been equally as volatile, even taking social media out of it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean this is the year we're looking back 50 years to 1968. And if you want to talk about a year in which the country was torn apart, the assassinations, the riots, the violence, the war. So, you know, if you look at history, at least with some perspective, you can see that we have gotten through much worse. Yeah,
and not even necessarily saying that what's happening with Trump himself, President Trump, is worse, but just all the turmoil and the divisiveness and the fact that, you know, people don't like to talk and reach a compromise. But it's, to me, something that is important to go back and look at, because otherwise I sometimes could feel someone like Tom thinking that no one gets along anymore. This is scary, and now they're all claiming fake news, and no one believes anything. If it's a negative story, they just figure it's a lie, and so no one wants to hear bad news. And you know what? Bad news exists, folks. It's out there. But it's kind of scary. But then if you look at history, this is an amazing country, all right? And it just, the system and the checks and balances and everything else still works.
No, I think history can be somewhat therapeutic at times, just to recognize we have been through very, very serious crises and gotten through them. And I do think, in a way, we're going to get through this. Exactly what it'll have some impact. It'll have some damage on the system, but I also think there's tremendous resources for recovery within the country.
Yeah. All right. So as we kind of wrap things up here on this, you know, every day it seems like something new. I think the bottom line still is that the true meat and details of what Robert Mueller is coming up with, perhaps with regard to collusion in Russia, is not out there yet.
No.
We don't know. I do know that people keep saying, and Rudy Giuliani, the president's, you know, a lawyer, says, well, it's time to wrap this up. This has been going on so long. Listen, folks, if you know anything about federal investigations, what Mueller's done to this point is short. And with the convictions is really short. They're moving incredibly fast. And I just use the local example of Sheriff Robert Arnold in Rutherford County. It took the feds 2.5 years to get moving on that. This case with Mueller is not taking a long time, and there's going to be a lot more to go. Right. Do you think the president can go after Mueller? Would he consider if things just continue to get difficult for him?
He could. I don't rule anything out with this president. I think it would, depending on the situation and the circumstances, precipitate a type of constitutional crisis and could really cause him serious problems with his party.
What about if he were to pardon Manafort?
Might depend on when. I mean, again, this could be very damaging if it looks like he's trying to protect people. Manafort, after all, wasn't convicted for anything that he did directly related to Trump. He was convicted for lying on his taxes. And essentially that would be a tremendously poor campaign thing for the Trump administration, to be sort of protecting people who cheat on their taxes.
Right. And then you do wonder, the reason he might do that, besides, well, you could say he's doing it for friendship, is if Manafort wants to maybe get some favor for his sentence, does he have perhaps some information to share that the president wouldn't want out there?
That is possible, and that could certainly affect Trump's considerations.
And no indication at all that he would, at least based on his most recent tweet, pardon Cohen.
No.
And Cohen, though, has said that he would not accept it. One way or the other. It's amazing how the closeness there was a time that Cohen said he'd take a bullet for the president. And the president, you know, stood by him, and they were very, very loyal to each other, and then that's just broken.
Yeah. No, that's certainly not the. I mean, Cohen's going to be a thorn in his side, I think, for the next few years.
And Cohen, because of the way this is played out, will have some credibility issues himself as well. The question is, though, does he have tape recordings? Does he have papers? Does he have documents? Yeah. And as his main lawyer, would you imagine he does?
I would imagine he has something, but I don't know how serious it would be in terms of it. And anything he has probably is, of course, pre-presidential. So it's more in the realm of things that people probably knew that Donald Trump was involved involved in, but it would depend on how serious that was.
Okay. And as far as other Republicans in Congress and the Senate, you know, I keep wondering. I know there are some that support him and really genuinely like him. I know there's others that probably think, oh man, I can't stand this guy, but I'm afraid to go out on the limb against him because of his support. Yeah. And that's where you wonder, well, get a spine if you feel that way, and if you support him, then get out there and be up front with him, right? I mean, what do you think Republicans are thinking then behind closed doors with all this stuff coming about?
Well, I think they worry about the future of their party, but it has become, I think, the general trend is it's become Trump's party, and it's kind of sink or swim with Donald Trump, and they're going to either
so they either get on board or they potentially are there some Republicans in home districts that can benefit by separating themselves with their constituents from the president?
I think some in states that are bluer, certainly than Tennessee, and others places where Trump's support is more fragile. So, for example, the governors in Massachusetts and Maryland who are running for re-election, who are Republican, they will separate themselves from Trump because of the environment they're in. But it's not, they probably don't constitute enough, the sort of Kasich's, Governor Kasich branch of the party, they don't constitute enough to really develop a third party.
Okay. And really, before we wrap things up, we're now, you know, going to be getting close to it after this midterm. What about Democrats? Who are they going to put up against him 2 years from now?
I think that's going to be just the 60. Well, it's the 64,000.
We just don't know. I mean, there's names floated out there and along the lines, and it can't be Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton. I'm sorry. If Democrats go that route, they're done anyway. So. Who will it be?
Well, I think there I put some caution because in 2006, before the midterms, we didn't have any idea who's going to be the sort of emerging, and so we
just don't know.
We don't know, and it really could be. There are all sorts of names. Elizabeth Warren certainly is out there, and there are various Cory Booker, Kamala Harris. I mean, a number of figures, and I would not count out Joe Biden. I disagree with you there. I do think that will partly depend on his health and whether he wants to. If Barack Obama wanted to, for example, weigh in strongly for him.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, listen, it's going to be interesting to see as all this develops. I'll say this, and I knew this when the president was elected, that there would be a lot of interesting things to talk about, and that's what it is. Professor, thank you for coming on. We'll talk again as this thing goes. So it's an education. Take a break. I'll be back with a programming note right after this. Stay with us.
You know what?